What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Style of Gaming, and thank you for joining me for another full style review. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, share this video if you enjoyed the content, and please comment below. I always welcome positive discussion on all things gaming, but let's get down to business and dive into what you're all here for, the full style review of Red Dead Redemption 2. There are mild spoilers while discussing the epilogue of this game. I will make timestamps available below so you can skip the epilogue discussion if you haven't quite got there, but I will make a very noticeable spoiler alert notice before going into the prologue. Red Dead Redemption 2 is an open-world sandbox, first and third-person hybrid narrative-driven shooter game that was released on Xbox One and PS4 on October 26, 2018 to extreme critical rave. For this review, I played on a PS4 for about 75 hours. I have 81% overall completion and have completed the main campaign and epilogue. For this review, we're going to dive directly into the story content, because this was truly the thing that kept me coming back to Red Dead Redemption 2 over and over again. One of the most unique things about Red Dead Redemption 2, and a surprise start for our review, is how the game handles its complex narrative. Red Dead 2 exhibits such emotional range and complexity likened to a novel, but in a completely interactive digital medium. It's hard not to come out of the gate and say that Red Dead has redefined what's possible in a narrative-driven game, and a bar-setting representation of what games are as a fine art. In this review, I don't want to spoil the story, because it's possible you might have different experiences. Your story may have played a little different than mine, and I really like that, and I don't want to ruin that for anybody else. Red Dead Redemption 2 follows the Vanderlyn Gang, a group of outlaws on the fray of society, looking to recover after a serious showdown in the town of Blackwater, which forced the gang to run and attempt to hide. The infamous Dutch Vanderlyn leads a cast of fan favorites while also introducing a wealth of new characters to fill the roles of the group. You play the intricate and highly developed character Arthur Morgan, a gruff but layered man dedicated to the teachings and causes Dutch has instilled in him throughout his life. While they may rob and thieve, their deeds are meant to serve a higher purpose, one echoing the sentiments of Robin Hood. At first, the gang takes from those who have enough or have more, but you can connect the dots as the story progresses in that philosophy. Advancing society is one of the major themes that influences Dutch. The group are outlaws to the new way of living and represent the Wild West. Dutch strings the group on the ideas of freedom and grandeur, nostalgic of an increasingly distant pastime, while the world steadily progresses and industrializes around them. Arthur is your main character, but you learn so much about your companions throughout the journey, especially the more you interact with camp. One of my favorite things about Red Dead is the way Arthur reflects on these relationships and his experiences with the world. His journal provides an extremely detailed ledger of his thoughts and ambitions, while also detailing the experiences that you've had in the world. It serves as a small void filling before the start of the game as well, and provides depth to the Blackwater gig, something that they make particular attention to bring to the player. They want to make sure that you know that Blackwater was the problem and why the whole plot is the way that it is. This way, though, Rockstar layers backstory without bashing you in the face with it. It's subtle and only found if you look for it. It's small details like this that are all over Red Dead, but are important to note here in defining what I feel is one of the most unique ideas explored in the game. Arthur and most of the outlaws in the gang were raised by Dutch, so crime and stealing are a way of life for them, and the codes of loyalty established have kept the group for alive, essentially, for as long as they have been around. However, we join the character, specifically Arthur, at a time where society is in direct opposition with his way of life and thinking. Arthur is a profound protagonist in the way that he is representative of the Wild West. He is the frontiersman and the outlaw, but he also displays intelligence and self-reflection indicative of modern thinking, philosophy, and society. His history with Mary Linton, a character in the game, is emblematic of duality present thematically at every junction. There's just this absolutely riveting dichotomy explored through Arthur's experiences that you don't really feel from the other cast members. Arthur is just so well written. You can understand and empathize with his struggle to determine where he is and what he must do as the plot begins to unfold alongside of Dutch. Dutch being a man who is unfolding in the wake of the encroaching law of the Pinkerton Law Agency and just the overall antics of the gang and the madness perpetuated by the group. There are so many threads cast in this story by so many different characters. There is character development to further exploration of positive character experiences and history, all while offering an array of bad blood to settle from characters and history that you did not even know about, but they very, very conveniently and I'd say pretty well inform you of that history as you're going along. I'm certain no one will get tired of hearing about those goddamn O'Driscoll boys. But the rival gangs and factions are important to the world's happenings as well as to specific characters such as the O'Driscoll rivalry with Dutch. The way Rockstar created an alternative history in an entirely fictitious world, one that echoes a real time, was masterful and extremely well done. The narrative weaves the birth of civil rights into the 20th century for African Americans while also balancing the complete destruction of rights for indigenous people all over the newly claimed US territories. The way Rockstar weaved the lives of the Vanderlyn gang with indigenous rebellion was novel and thrilling. I found myself really invested in the Rains Falls and Eagle Flies missions where you aid and use the Lakota tribe. Within the indigenous plotline, there's a microcosm of the larger narrative of Red Dead Redemption 2, that being the overall theme of the fluctuation of society and the changing of worldviews, while also maintaining the worldview that is emblematic of who you are as a person and what has helped you survive. There was no gratuitous language or obscenities towards minority characters in this game, and I think that's really good because they handled the timepiece of the set incredibly well. Like, there was nothing that I felt was, as I said, gratuitous or unnecessary. All of the dialogue and the use of extreme pejoratives was totally used from a standpoint artistically. And with that being said as well, the promotion of civil justice was really smooth. The gang measured people by the merit of their character and not by really any other principles, so the writing came off as genuine and avoided being preachy while also clearly choosing a side of what's doing right. I could go on about the nuances of the story, but in all honesty, you just really need to experience it for yourself. This game is incredible. Arthur's story is an expansive 6 chapters that leaves the player honestly exhausted, but in one of the most unique and satisfying ways I've ever experienced. The conclusion of the story is rough and somewhat hard to handle, but I feel it was executed in a way that allows acceptance and understanding to the conclusion of this narrative that just winds all over the place. Because this is a prequel, it's obvious not everyone was going to make it, but they made every interaction of the gang feel valuable. It's a wild ride that left me confused and bothered, but also deeply satisfied. The narrative is what kept me coming to this game, even sometimes when I didn't know why. Mundane actions and arbitrary plot development sometimes muddied the near-perfect story in Red Dead. Sometimes the writing falls flat and dialogue seems unnecessary, but I feel like I have to nitpick to sound objective in this unbelievably in-depth story. But truly, there's some moments that I honestly didn't realize, I didn't understand why they were choosing to kind of shirk the emotional moment that they had created with, some kind of, banter that Rockstar is typical of. I don't know. Play the game, make the decision for yourself.
Well, suck it, Dad!
Now, I want to say I'm going to begin discussing the epilogue, so please, if you haven't played the epilogue or you're trying to remain spoiler-free, go ahead and go to the timestamps below, look and see when I get out of the epilogue, and then you'll rejoin us on the other side. The epilogue felt like the most unexpected sequel to the Oregon Trail I never thought was going to happen. For those of you who are listening, you might know what I mean when playing as John Marston. Fans of Red Dead were probably really excited for this, even though they shouldn't have been, really all that surprised by the switch in protagonist from Arthur to John, especially knowing this was a prequel. But I really did enjoy the John sections. It's digital storytelling on a whole other level. There were points where I felt like I didn't know why I wanted to build fences and milk cows. It was just strange that I was willing to dedicate hours of my time doing things I'd never consider in real life, but are 100% in the realm of something that I'm completely capable of doing. Red Dead Redemption 2 sometimes felt like a simulator, and not really a game, but this section brought an entirely new meaning to my thoughts on that. The whole epilogue was overall enjoyable, and it felt like the conclusion the players wanted, because the conclusion to the core 6 chapters may leave you cross. It was obvious they needed to tie this into the other game, and as someone distant from the first iteration, I didn't feel the epilogue forced me to understand all of the intricate sides of the predecessor to really enjoy the experience that I was given. Exploring New Austin somehow felt even lonelier than the core 6 chapters, however. As I played through the epilogue, I made sure to travel all over and explore the map. And quite honestly, it didn't really serve me all that well. While I was met by a wealth of compendium entries and random strangers, and the environment was grand and beautiful, it was absent of the sprawling civilizations that the core had, and the things that really brought the core map, New Hanover, and the surrounding states to life. However, when the civilization was there, the even larger gaps between the establishments in New Austin led to a somewhat repetitive and tiresome traversal, but I don't know if that's necessarily just the epilogue, or if by that point I was just so drained of insanely long horse rides. But I feel like the horse riding just was like another layer to Rockstar's ability to invoke immersion. I feel like this notion applies to the core game as well, but you could truly get a sense for the land and recognize where you were going because of how much you had to ride around. After traveling between Rhodes and Valentine for so long, I felt like I knew the quickest and most efficient way, even without a marker or any type of notification on the HUD. It helped give weight to the decisions of allowing us as the player to turn off the HUD and immerse in the world by following signs in game. As I said, Red Dead Redemption has so many points of interest and allows you to immerse in whatever way you feel comfortable. Casual or hardcore alike, you will feel satisfied in what you accomplish. I would say my biggest gripe with the story lies within the fact that some of the characters in the gang don't feel as fleshed out as others. Rockstar worked very hard to capture a delicate slice of the Vanderlyn gang's life, and in doing so, managed to capture a depth unseen in most games, but only for a few characters. Some of the members of the game, like Mr. Pearson and Miss Grimshaw, were present at almost every major junction, but felt completely flat as boards, and functioned merely as in-depth shopkeepers and seldom in the narrative to fill dead space when the going got slow. I appreciate that they wanted to fill the dead air in the narrative, but I would have appreciated a genuine attempt to round every member and make this a truly polyphonic narrative, focused on the whole gang, or would have gone in the direction of focusing exclusively on Arthur, Dutch, and John, and maybe pick and choose a few, Hosea, however you see fit, but you get the gist. I feel it would have allowed for substantial depth to a chosen few and allowed the gang to feel more natural, even though their interactions were grand and incredibly naturalistic, just in general. This was a small gripe, but something I felt worth stating, as I'm trying to nitpick to sound as objective as possible. Overall, the story is complicated and wonderful, frustrating and rewarding, for its heavy length and for multiple waves of brutality and beauty. Arthur is an unbelievable character who is well-rounded and feels relatable in so many ways. Rockstar took a common character trope, the struggle with who we are and our role in society, and told it in such an excellent and profound way that kept me struggling through to the bitter end. I did a lot of hunting and land exploration, but played through the story and haven't nearly scratched the surface of what this game offers and what's left to do in my playthrough. The writing staff and every person involved in bringing the story to life should feel very proud of their work and dedication to such an incredible project. where to even begin about gameplay in a game that is this absolutely massive and full of player activities. I will attempt to make a stab with Arthur and the player systems available in the game. Red Dead 2 seeks to stay true to the model of sandbox experiences Rockstar has previously delivered, but completely rejects some of the basic building blocks of open world gaming. I think one of the most divisive and complicated mechanics to properly do is stat maintenance for any character in any game. It's divisive because to a lot of casual players, constantly checking to make sure your stats are good to go before an encounter can seem cumbersome. For the hardcore player, they love this, as long as it's done well. I think it's safe to say that Rockstar has done an impeccable job at offering a stat system and ways of maintaining said system, even if they don't properly explain it. The health, stamina, and Deadeye core / rings is complicated at first, but very amenable when you discover its tricks. These stats are your main stats and the most important. These are your no ifs, ands, or buts, meaning they must be managed or you will have one hell of a time in this game. Your cores are the icons in the middle that represent your overall stat and your capability to regenerate. If your health core is full, but your health bar is empty, the circle around it, get to cover and see the white ring slowly refill. When the core reaches empty, you're in some trouble. Low health core, slow to no health regen, and the same idea for each other stat. You can do various things to resolve this problem, sleeping being your most beneficial, as it refills your core on every stat. These function as the pure essentials and are needed for everything. Always check your Deadeye when going into a story mission, and don't be like me and going empty. I say this just as kind of a pro tip going forward because almost every single mission wants you to complete without using a health item, so look out. However, if you don't care about gold completion or in-game completion tasks, who cares? Move on. With the essential stats covered, the immersive and sometimes brutal maintenance comes into play in Red Dead Redemption 2. Arthur is an outlaw living on the cusp of modern society, and that comes with caveats and disadvantages. The game challenges you to maintain your hygiene, the quality of your clothes, and your hair. And while these mechanisms don't truly impede the player if disregarded, Rockstar makes sure in cinematics and even in brief dialogue, the NPCs take notice of your appearance. They might call you dirty or, something or another. Going even further, you have to consider hunger, because food and drink are not just considerations for your stat cores, but reflect how those stat cores can handle over time. Over and under eating affects your weight and subsequently stamina and health totals and regeneration. On top of this, temperature is a consideration to your cores. The US is full of unique and varying biomes with different temperaments, and your clothing must follow suit. Loose clothing in the frigid mountains results in a diminished core and slow health regen. Each temperament has a different effect on Arthur's core, so be mindful. Under all of these mechanics, there is also a morality piece that really helps define the dualistic narrative and character arc of Arthur. It's easy enough to understand. Your honor is determined by the way you live. Murder and kill, and you become an outlaw. Be friendly to your townspeople and help strangers. Do the tasks that you're supposed to. Your honor will grow. The higher your honor, the better your shop prices. There really isn't much working against an outlaw, just no added benefits, so murder to your heart's desire. However, the game does help levy this mechanism by the incredible emotional story, writing, and voice work, because if you're like me, you probably felt the impacts of your brutal actions if you just, accidentally killed like 25 lawmen. But I don't know, I feel like the game does a way of setting up Arthur that you feel as the player the impacts of your actions beyond the flimsy moral bar at the bottom. These are merely the player management mechanics, not even getting into anything else. All of these stats have unique nuances that you should play with and see how they change your playstyle or your decision making. You can smoke, drink, sleep, eat cocaine gum, and craft your way to statistical balance. I have to say, cooking in the game is awesome, not as awesome as, say, like Final Fantasy 15 or Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, but it's definitely on track. It's super cool. You can just prepare hunks of meat from game that you've got as you travel, or you can also prepare unique recipes if you have all the crafting ingredients. You can enjoy stew from Pearson's Pot at camp, or you can build camp wherever you go, relax, cook, and watch the beautiful views. It's important to note, though, that the game has multiple percentages for completion. You have story completion, compendium, and overall completion. If you're a diehard completionist, I bid good luck to you and a tip of the hat, because it is going to be a long road. I've played nearly 80 hours of this game and barely feel I've scratched the surface. One of the less in-your-face systems, with that being said, is the challenges. These require, in most cases, extreme planning and intent to achieve. Unlike most challenge systems in gaming that allow for natural progression as you play, you need to consider these 90 challenges consistently to unlock them. Not all of them are unlocked at the same time, and you must do the previous challenge to unlock the next challenge. For example, one challenge is a race to Rhodes from Valentine, and you've got to complete it in under 5 minutes. It's clear this requires a deliberate attempt. It's just another layer that Rockstar adds in making this game as immersive as it possibly can. These challenges range from the table games you play, gunslinging, thieving, herb specializing, and more. It's definitely worth a check out, but don't expect to knock all of them out in one easy swoop, and don't feel that you're missing out on a huge wealth of content if you don't unlock those challenges, because it merely just unlocks different collectibles as well as different satchels and customization options for you at trappers and different vendors. I think one of the coolest mechanics is the hat system. It's very small, but it is impeccable. Not only can you craft different hats and store them on your horse with different outfits, you can essentially blow a dude's head off and pick up his cap right after. The outfits and hats you store at your horse can be changed at camp, but if you lose your hat, you can always get it back from your horse. However, there are unique hats only available to other NPCs, and the game tells you that this is a unique hat. Giving it away means that you will lose it forever. But look out for these and try and pick them up if they get knocked off your head in a scrap. Check them out. Some of them are really cool. It's also important to note gun maintenance is a small but important system to track as well. Your weapons will eventually dirty and risk jamming and lower the overall stats of the gun if not cleaned. It's an easy solve by just examining the gun and cleaning it with gun oil, but just make sure that you're stocked up. You can see the visible dirt clean away as you maintain your favorite cowboy killer. Just a cool little caveat, cool little detail that they decided to throw in there. The overall pace of Red Dead is sometimes painfully slow, and this is a conscious decision by Rockstar, seemingly to force the player to experience the depth of the writing and fully experience the world they crafted. I have a love-hate relationship with the pace. You'll kind of pick out certain things that I say throughout the review because I get it, and I feel that by the end of the game, I was tolerant of how slow that it was going, but I wanted it to speed up so bad. So essentially, though, you can assume that this means that your traversal options are limited in respect to the environment and often by the narrative. Another kind of like clenchy hand-holdy thing in a game that's supposed to be not about hand-holding, but again, neither here nor there. The scale of the map is absolutely staggering, to say the least. So traveling by horse and carriage is a long venture, but one that is cushioned by mountains of different horse breeds, customizations, unique options for your character, supplemented by just excellent auxiliary dialogue and world building. The game supports 3 major forms of fast travel. The first unlocked after upgrade, well, I guess there's really no official order. The game technically introduces stagecoach and railroad first, but the first system that I even used in the game was I spent $300 upgrading Dutch and Arthur's tents so I could unlock a fast travel from Arthur's tent, and it was a complete waste of money. Complete waste of money. It sends you on an old western cinematic to places that you've been to on horseback, and the cinematic is cool, don't get me wrong, but the personal fast travel upgrade, like pretty much most of the camp upgrades, is an absolute waste. I'm saying it right now, don't waste your money. Just go to shopkeepers to refill your ammo and goods if needed, and spend money to look like a badass. The other 2 forms of fast travel are much more preferred, and realistically you'll spend about as much money through full fast travel in the game as you do on the upgrades for those camps. But carriage and train are your other 2 fast travels, and they're like a traditional fast travel system, but you have to go to one of them. You go to the carriage, you go to a train, and then you can go to other cities or with the train station, obviously other train stations. However, with a carriage, you must have a clear bounty in the area, so you can actually initiate the carriage, but it doesn't have to be, you can have a bounty on the place that you go. Voila, you're there. Little transitionary scene, boom, you're there. Same with the train. However, like I said, these systems do cost money, and it's something to consider if you're not wanting to ride to every single place, but again, you will make money so much faster in the late game that you won't have to worry about fast traveling. I didn't even think about spending money until I started customizing things. Ultimately, though, horse is the best way to go, but be wary of your horse. It has its own stats that reflect your stats and your stat cores, and they're also contingent on the bonding level that you have, as well as its capabilities based upon breed of the horse. I think one of the most impressive things to complement the traversal system is the hit detection system in the game. While there were times I hit a pebble and went flying and that was total crap, the game does an excellent job at deciphering the player character's location, so much so that all the unique tree branches and limbs from the varying trees in the game can knock your ass right off of the horse if you run through deep brush. But it's frustrating, but also hilarious. Every time I flew off the horse, I was just laughing my ass off. The game's natural punishment for failed free riding kept me staying on the trail most of the games, though, because of fear of flying off a mountain or just, being bashed by... I was bashed off a tree and then landed on a rock on my head and it killed me. Red Dead does a phenomenal job at making the riding feel engaging, though, when you are engaged. And I say that because one of the best features of riding allows you to pull back, and is hands down my favorite feature of the game, but the cinematic camera. You basically... you just hold down for the PlayStation, the center button, and it just pulls you back, gives you cinematic bars, and allows you to watch it like you're watching a cutscene. And it's just nice because to be able to enjoy the narrative, the writing, without constantly being in charge of your horse across the gigantic map was always really refreshing and helped add a cinematic layer to events that would normally be considered mundane or, even conversation that seemed unimportant. I'd say personal management and traversal are the largest mechanics to describe in the game, but that doesn't even come close to the amount of elements that are still buried in this game. Take, for example, the Compendium. Red Dead Redemption 2 is lush with a wide array of wildlife to study, hunt, and skin, but also a wealth of plant life to study and learn the benefits from. The Compendium functions as your guide and almanac to everything you've explored or have learned in the game. It's a great place to go back to if you ever need to hunt a specific animal and have forgotten its location, as well as finding out the benefits of plants you pick. For example, wild ginseng is a stamina herb used to craft stamina tonics, or directly eaten to benefit and restore your stamina core. Red Dead Redemption 2 has over 150 species of unique animals to explore and hunt, and it's unbelievable. I know games have let us hunt before, but Red Dead truly takes it to a whole nother level. Not only is the hunting challenging and requires the use of your Deadeye skill system to help track animals, each animal requires a different weapon to provide a clean kill and get the highest quality 3-star pelt when skinning. When you actually study the animals, it will tell you need to use a repeater or a small game arrow to get a clean kill. It's just really awesome. But on top of that, the skinning animations for most of the animals is realistic to the point of brutality, but not without it's not gratuitous. Just makes you watch the actual cutting and digging and skinning and ripping depending on which animal you have. The whole system is superb. It's so, again, natural. That's been like my mantra with this game, is natural and flow. It just flows like a living world. But I was really reluctant at first to start hunting, but once I got my feet wet, hunting became my favorite task in the whole game. Mostly learning about the animals, because it's cool. They give you a little bit of information about them every time you actually investigate them. And the birds always made me feel like a badass when I could study them, just like by riding up on my horse and be like, yeah, Compendium ad. But I felt like a true avian master when I'd bust out the binoculars on horseback to study an eagle or a falcon that was fleeting. And I mean, this is merely the beginning of the animal factors, not only considering how many all of them there are. The real fun comes from taking the skins you've hunted and crafting gear and accessories from them. Even more so is hunting the legendary animals for their skin, because each of the legendary animal skin outfits is incredibly unique, so original, compared to each other, and honestly made me feel like I was working towards something every time I engaged in a lengthy hunt, because some legendary animal hunts, it was like, bam, done. I got it done super quick, but then some of them, it took me forever. But with that being said, I think it's a perfect opportunity to talk about missions and other important systems in the gameplay. Rockstar has imbued a fine level of storytelling in Red Dead Redemption 2. The missions and pacing feel natural and rarely force you into the next encounter. They give you plenty of time to go explore the wealth of side missions, hidden collectibles, hunting, and table games wherever you feel like it. I won't go into depth about mission types, but many of the missions in Red Dead Redemption 2 function kind of like a cookie trail to open up the map and offer new mechanisms, or even offer new gear to the player. There are objective badges at the end of each mission that typically want you to do the mission fast. That's honestly one of my biggest gripes with the game, is the game moves so slow, and so many of the mission badges were do it fast, but they also have different requirements. But it's basically a tier of bronze, silver, and gold in the mission quality. How well did you do something? And often there is little to no direct reward for completing missions. This is kind of one of those open world topsy-turvy things, like you do a mission, you get something. Not in Red Dead. The game is very natural in helping you unlock in-game weapons by essentially just offering them to you as you go along through the story. The side missions are sometimes completely random, such as helping this British guy I met. His name was Margaret, and he had a bunch of animals for a traveling zoo. 2 of his animals were fake, and then you actually end up wrangling an actual fucking lion. It was definitely something. They're interesting world-building missions, but the real winner is the side quests and heists that involve your camp members. They just offer a rich opportunity to interact and learn more about your family and everybody in the camp. I say everybody in your family because, the camp is your family. I also absolutely love the table games. I honestly never knew that Dominoes was a real game, and I'm willing to admit that. As a kid, I just always would set them up and knock them down. I had to take 20 minutes to learn each of the 3 styles of dominoes that are present in the game. It was really satisfying to actually learn the new game and then succeed digitally while playing at the camp. It was also really cool to be able to apply poker knowledge that I have recently obtained, as well as blackjack knowledge while playing in game. And I struggled trying to write about what was so unique about them, but I really don't have anything other to add about them other than they are badass. It's literally blackjack, poker, and dominoes inside of Red Dead. There's no crazy fanciness. It's just a game inside of a game. It's very meta that way. There's also another game. It's really awesome and it gets really challenging. Five Finger. It's a classic game, and I'm guaranteed you've played it in school with scissors or pencils. But it's where you just spread your fingers and you kind of tap, 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 tap in between each of your fingers, trying to avoid smashing your fingers. But the way the game does it is with button prompting that requires you to go back before the thumb each time. So it would go before the thumb, before your pointer finger, back to the thumb, before your middle finger, back to the thumb, before your ring finger, back to the thumb, before your pinky. And it got really challenging once you got up to level 3. These games are merely ways of staying connected to the game, but you don't really need to play them. You don't need them for money, or there's not really even a purpose to them other than the actual enjoyment of just doing it. But like any Rockstar game before it, Red Dead Redemption 2 has an unbelievable wealth of customization options to make you the unique gunslinger that you want to be. I've been dancing around customization. That's because it's just so in-depth. As stated in the hunting section, hunting provides a wealth of opportunities for your visual setup and making yourself a distinct frontiersman, but there are plenty of things to craft that are for utility and just exclusively for visual zest. You can upgrade your satchel for larger spaces, and there's unique ones. It's not like you just get a general large satchel for everything. It's either a tonic bag or whatever, but you can get reinforced gear to improve armor and the like, and you can get your hair cut, styled, and you can even apply pomade. I mean, when you're actually in a town like Saint Denis, you can purchase specific hairstyles, full outfits, and sets of equipment. I like it because you can view your whole outfit, shirts, jackets, and the like as you shop. It doesn't give you the option outright, just make sure you hit the preview view and you can see all of the items for purchase on Arthur before you actually purchase them. A small detail I enjoy about the shops is you can view every object for sale physically in the shop and purchase your goods. You don't have to view and read the almanac at the counter shop or even interact with the clerk. It's a small but awesome and immersive detail. I think the thing that impressed me the most was spur customization. I love all the color and the style options available. It complements the overall variety of options for boots, pants, etc. It's very subtle but excellent. However, the clothes and hair customization don't hold a candle to the layers of depth that customizing your weapons and horse have. Again, where do I even start? When it comes to your guns, you can do a basic set of customization for stats, such as improving rifling for accuracy and range, changing barrels, etc., but it's mostly all about the visual aesthetics, in my opinion. You can change the color of every component of your gun, whether using a long scope rifle, revolver, shotgun. I honestly think the only thing you couldn't customize was the bow. However, I did only unlock half of the guns available after completing the full game, so there's a ton of options I still have to discover. Change the metal type, and subsequently you change the color of your barrel, stock, trigger, hammer, you name it. You can choose grain types, the width of the grain, and the types of varnish. You can even engrave symbols of the West into your guns. I love that bald eagle. I love that bald eagle and that rattler. This same concept can be applied when customizing your horse. Not only is there 23 different breeds of horse, but you can change types of saddles, saddlebags, bedrolls, blankets, hand mounts, everything. The customization is deep in Red Dead Redemption 2, but it honestly is there without feeling like it's forced or unnecessary. It's just an awesome benefit to the systems that are actually there. Now, the physical gameplay itself, the mechanics and the controls at the controller, while there are moments the game works incredibly well and it's super smooth, I'd say the controls are my biggest issue with this game in its entirety. Rockstar has loaded an unbelievable amount of options into the controls, and as a result, sometimes scenarios can seem clunky or even leave you exposed and die. I really enjoy the way you have to interact with companions and even provoke conversations by engaging with the shoulder button and then hitting a face button to talk to somebody. It helps avoid accidental mission starts and gives you some control over additional dialogue as you're riding along. However, the shoulder button prompts are very important to pay attention to, or at least pay attention to your hip and back. There are so many times I did not have my gun drawn and was spamming the shoulder button and was just taking an in-depth look at the enemies and not aiming. And that's because my gun wasn't out and there's a unique mechanism to actually do that. You can either hit the front left shoulder button to draw and then aim, or you can pull down the back shoulder button, then hit the fire button and pull your weapon out. The point that I'm trying to make is the fact that there are so many options and so much engagement that's mapped to the same buttons in Red Dead Redemption 2 that sometimes cause clunky reactions in play. It was also infuriating that you cannot swap shoulders. That seems like a guarantee and a no-brainer in the modern third-person shooter landscape, but that's just me. I had such a love-hate relationship with the cover system in Red Dead 2. Sometimes Arthur would grab the cover and it was immaculate, and when you aimed over objects, he would whip around the corners and his body would articulate in a way that made sense with how you were actually snapping to the enemy. But sometimes, a lot of the time, Arthur would run to horrible cover spots, wouldn't transition, would pop out of cover, couldn't aim over objects, would be blocked by stupid shit that could be resolved by switching shoulders, and it just caused massive stress when, like, an O'Driscoll fight would break out or any other gang. I think it's minute and it's not a global problem, but there's a lot of time that the mechanics worked absolutely grand, but then there was a lot of times when I was on the back of a wagon and whipped out my shotgun and shot a horse to death. Overall, I would say that I thought that first person mode was very solid. I didn't spend much time in the mode because of how much time you spend on horse and carrying objects, but there was some really interesting quality that you can only see in the first person. I love that when you're bringing in a bounty or carrying a carcass in first person, it would literally change the path that you walked in, as well as have a slight tilt in the camera view, indicating that you were leaning over holding the weight. It's a really small detail, but it's really cool, and the first person also allowed you to invest a little further in conversations by reading the impeccable facial animations and emotions conveyed, because again, the facial and ocular animations of this game are incredible. All in all, the horseback riding and first person it made me sick. I couldn't do it, and I also felt like I wasn't really beneficial as a shooter in the first person, not because the controls were clunky, because it felt just as good as Grand Theft Auto 5 in first person. I'm just a fan of third person shooters, and the Deadeye system just feels more natural in third person to me, and it made those cinematic breaks just seem even more badass. Red Dead Redemption 2 is an absolute technological marvel and easily one of the most impressive games I have ever experienced visually. I found myself consistently saying, wow, this game looks so good for how big it is. But I think there's something wrong in that statement. This game looks absolutely gorgeous and just so happens to be ridiculously massive. I want to know the formula for the secret sauce. I imagine because it has to do with the fact that there is a lot of open space in the game, but don't let that deter you. Every single environment is rendered unbelievably well. I think one of the most impressive things to note right off the bat is how distinct each major town looks from one another. The first time you run into Valentine, I felt at home as I approached the emblematic western set. The saloon, the general store, and the gunsmith. The wooden porch, the muddy road, the cowboy trope we've seen over and over as the setting to every gunslinger showdown. I was really enthralled, but most importantly, Valentine had a unique candor separate from the more naturally entwined strawberry. The real showstopper, though, in my opinion, is Saint Denis. The first time that I accidentally stumbled across the major industrialized city, I was immediately shocked by the change in sound profile from my horse as the natural ruffling of the hooves on the grass and dirt transitioned to the hard clack of its shoes meeting the cobblestone. I was also duly impressed as I almost got killed by the streetcar bustling around a corner. And I mean, that's just the exterior. Everything that I've been describing thus far has just been the exterior. All of the posts that you go into, fences, saloons, train stations, banks, random cabins, and interiors exclusive to the story are meticulously detailed and planned out. Some storefronts have cracked and splintered paint, lifted floorboards, while others have Victorian flair, grandiose details, and super gaudy fireplaces, and just overall style. There are so many details inside of the spaces that most of the time function purely as transitionary. The tableware and trinkets of cabinets throughout the game is exceptional. No cabin or land feels like a click and copy. Each environment feels lavishly detailed and well thought out. Saint Denis, again, represents the hub of industrialized advancement in this world, and each building, storefront, sign, and even the names of each building were distinct from each other. The random businesses that you couldn't even go to were highly detailed. Each shop, saloon, and gunsmith in each city had its own distinct storefront that allows the player to connect with the world in a way most games don't offer. I think this is a great part to note one of my favorite features in the game, which is the fact that Rockstar has allowed the player to turn off the HUD whenever they please. I had mentioned it before, but I kind of wanted to go in a little bit more depth right now. But a lot of people probably think, how do I navigate in a world that's so complicated with so many points of interest with no HUD? Well, there's natural signs and markers all throughout the game that point you to the directions at major crossroads or even just painted on boulder sides. It's actually really incredible. You can play this as much like a video game that you're comfortable with, a normal sandbox, Or you can throw yourself into the partial simulator-like world that Rockstar has created, slow down, read signs, track everything in every way, and be a true pioneer. This concept is cemented when you analyze the biomes and overall environment of the game. Each area is very distinct, as I previously mentioned. I never found myself saying, oh, well, this area kind of looks like the previous area. The unique foliage and tree coverage made while in the dank swamps, like north of Saint Denis, look totally different from the lush canopies created when leaving the brutal winter mountains north of New Hanover. The forest biomes, hot and cold, were impressive alike. But I honestly couldn't get over how amazing New Austin looked in the epilogue. The flora in the desert reminded me of the Mexico-Arizona border, with the sprawling variety of cactus, sage, and other low-water vegetation. It was just a really nice transition from the normalized greenery of New Hanover and the surrounding states. I think, in my opinion, this helped legitimize the option to remove the HUD by making each area and biome so distinct, because you could actually figure out where you were and make your own paths from point to point rather than following the objective markers. It was actually really cool. It was just like, oh, I know where I'm going at this point. I don't need to set an objective. I know what areas I can break through, which are full of tree coverage and which are hard to kind of break through the areas and not have to follow the road. But it's also really awesome because your companions to missions will also fill you in on the directions as you go to kind of, support that inner pioneer in you and allow you to play the game without the HUD if you so choose. And while I'm here, I have to gush about the environmental deformation in this game. I talk a lot about this, and this is kind of like my sweet spot, but oh my god, when I first got to Valentine, I couldn't even believe it. I was like, holy crap, the mud looks great. And I appreciated the visuals and how slick the mud looked. But it also had like unique pooling, like the rain had pooled in unique puddles. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. This looks great. But then I drove my wagon over and noticed the puddles flooding into like new deformed puddles. And the tracks of the wagon were basically, they were being imprinted into the mud separate from the horse hoof imprints that were being left in the mud. Each of them were distinct. And honestly, this is an impeccable feat, and it can be witnessed all over Red Dead. From deep and even shallow snow to deformation in swamplands under the shallow layer of water, the detail was just unbelievable, just absolutely remarkable. I mean, even when you're like sliding down or tumbling down a mountain if you fell on your ass, you can watch loose rocks and even boulders slide down the mountain with you. This level of detail is honestly unprecedented and bar-setting for the whole genre, but games as a whole. I mean, there's games that are 1/4 the size of this that don't even come close to this level of detail in their environment. With that being said, I think one of the most sensible things for me to talk next about graphically was the lighting and how well it worked within the day and night cycles, as well as the unique weather in the game. There were just junctions in the game that I had to stop and stare as volumetric lighting just cut through the tree canopies and just pierced through the fog, illuminating a faint silhouette of my character and horse. I have so many pictures of faint silhouettes of my horse and I just because the god rays in the game are just extraordinary. And I couldn't help myself. I wanted to play at dawn and dusk pretty much all the time. The natural system of the sunrise is just splendid, and the sunsets are just as beautiful. They did an extraordinary job capturing the color and the color blending and flows of sunsets in the West. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico. We love our sunsets there, and it was such an awesome experience to see how well they captured it. I think what really tickled me, though, was how the global lighting at night worked so well with the natural lighting from candles that were all over cabins, shacks, and even like the street lamps and street corners. It just, seeing the warm glow of the light of like a desolate cabin as you're like approaching and near pitch black, basically the only light being just like the glaring of the full moon, it just resonated with me. It reminded me of every great Western I've ever seen. The visual imagery evokes so many great memories for me at every turn with this game. The color palettes are just heavily considered, and it looked extraordinary. There was never oversaturation of one color or color group. There was never too much green or brown, and I think when you have a repetitive environment, and when your environment falls to repetitive colors, it's easy for your player to disengage from the content because it's really easy to go into the back burner. I've said numerous times, and this might just be my own crazy brain, but basically whenever games go into chapters where it's like a desert, that's when games lose me, because deserts typically have a really low chance of visual diversity and, distinct features. And so that's why, when you look at a game like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, they did such a really good job with their huge vistas and making it not feel exhausting just looking at the environment. And Red Dead just took it to the next level. I think the last but equally important distinction to make for Red Dead is the unbelievable animations in this game. I'm willing to bet that there's easily over 250,000 unique animations in this game. I mean, this section could be as long as this entire review, and it's already been way too long. But I will reserve myself. However, whether you're waking up from a nap, talking to another character, trading, or basically any action, Red Dead Redemption 2 has a unique animation for it. The horse animations, holy crap. Just the animations, the modeling, the texture map, everything. It's probably one of the most impressive ventures in the whole game. Not only can you see the bulging of the muscles as you gallop through the world, but your horse has unique ocular and mouth movement animations. I mean, you can see your horse visually reacting to how hard you're riding it. And your horse even reacts to predators in the environment, such as snakes and bears and cougars, and it'll straight up buck your ass off if you get too close to it if the horse becomes spooked. Another factor, the lasso animation, whether you're on horseback or ground, is just smooth as silk, and it feels completely natural. Like, you can literally watch your character spin his wrist and watch kind of the slack of like the rope. Because if you've ever actually thrown like a lassoed rope, it's not just like nylon. It's not just like a rope that you think. It's a unique type of rope, and they just did a really good job of capturing the visual fidelity of it. Even I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm just like getting so hyped up about it because there's so many animations, whether it's looking at the fact that all of your guns are actually attached to your back and you take them out and store them properly. Even pulling your revolver out from your hip and reholstering it is impressive. You watch it actually happen. You can listen to the clipping of the actual holster like lifting up and then the gun coming out. I mean, the visual fidelity in this game is just absolutely absurd. And I mean, when you actually use a cigar or smoke cigarettes in the game, I mean, you bust out matches and you light it up. You take a few puffs, and then you throw it on the ground. And I mean, it's just like when you eat a can of beans or other vegetables, he eats it and then he throws it on the ground. Arthur actually functions with the objects that are in the world, and that's just crazy. And I mean, I stated this earlier, there's even unique animations for when you're holding things, animations for leaning against posts and fences, a unique animation for everything. I could sit here for hours trying to talk about it, but it was just so awesome when you would like log in from like turning the game off and just seeing Arthur kind of leaning up against a pole, or leaning forward with a fence, or just kind of kneeling by a campfire. I mean, every action was very concrete and very well thought out. The world feels like it has weight, and that physics are like an actual factor in the game, and you can tell this by just how impressive the animations are. There's no crazy limbs or weightless actions like as the characters move about the world. Not only that, but the facial expressions and ocular animations for the main characters and most of the group in your camp are impressive and reflect the demeanor of the mood or scenario. I was super impressed with the nuances of Abigail's face in one of the final prologue scenes. The motion capture of her gestures made me think of the details in Elena's face from Uncharted, and that game is a fourth the size of Red Dead Redemption 2. Again, it's just extraordinary. It's true, this game is truly something. I think Something everyone can agree on, though, about the animations is how important those dog petting animations are. There's really nothing more I need to add about it. Just pet every single dog you can, okay? Just do it. My only gripe here is that you can't pet all the animals. It's lame you can't pet cats or goats or cows. The musical score in Red Dead was an excellent approach. It was emotional and thrilling when it needed, and it was somber and reflective when you were traveling across large areas of land. The natural soundtrack is very subtle as you play. I mean, at some points it doesn't even seem like it's there. It might be a gentle stroke of guitar chords here and there, or just light instrumentation strictly as a background, not trying to pull you out from your experience. But the intense music and the music that was composed with lyrics was typically saved for moments in the narrative, whether that would be transitionary periods or for like the actual story cinematics. You got actual songs that were written and produced. Rockstar's releasing the official soundtrack as a secondary product to this game. Like, I think that's impressive. I love when games do that because you know that their soundtrack was really well thought about. But I really think that this approach to music really helped convey that naturalized feel I've been talking about through this whole review. And I say naturalized in the sense that the way that you get missions and do everything in the game seems to flow, rather than just being gained through hard objective markers or just showing up places. I think this is really prominent for the music, and you can tell this because most of the time there are bands or groups like playing music in saloons, and you can hear the music as you approach the doors of the saloon, but then the full sound just rushes you as you fling open the doors and actually go into the saloon. You can hear the player piano in the different groups. I think a scene that really speaks for itself is the job where you're helping Trelawney on the riverboat, where you're basically trying to scam that dude in a poker game. There are musicians playing all over the deck, and as you approach their distinct tune, whether it's harp or piano, whatever it might be, it becomes more apparent as you get closer to it, as it naturally would in real life. I think this natural audio did serious justice for the setting of the world. It felt real, and it felt like there wasn't a soundtrack to the game, but music that posited as the story or the world saw fit. It wasn't just an arbitrary soundtrack. It's those moments that you imagine in your own life should have a soundtrack, and they had all those moments. Those important moments just would light up with music. It was very well done. And I think it's also important to give a shout out to the Foley artist who did the sound profiles in the game. I mean, everything you step on, everything you touch and interact with, like I was talking about the holsters earlier, has distinct noises, and the transitions of sounds are immaculate. Most notably, the horse mechanics, but even down to the spurs of your boots on different elements like cobble or stone or even in mud. You know, there's just unique sounds of the hammer on different guns, unique firing patterns, etc. This game just sounds impeccable. But, honestly, I'd be shocked if it weren't this way, considering the level of depth of detail and everything else. With all things considered, or at least as many as I can possibly remember, Red Dead Redemption 2 is not a traditional sandbox filled with tasks taking players from point A to point B. While you definitely go on hordes of missions that pull you around the map, the game consistently adds substance and meaning behind main and side quests, character actions, motives, and plot development as you make your way through. Red Dead Redemption 2 is constantly interacting with the player, naturally steering you through the massive world and meticulously crafted narrative. At times, the game is more forceful in its guidance, particularly in the first 2 chapters, but Rockstar is merely forcing you to take in the world. It might seem frustrating in the beginning, but over time, the game helps you feel like the pace is justified as you experience character development, story progression, and world building with excellently crafted small talk and dialogue, in addition to a superb voice cast as an icing to the marvelously detailed world you move in. While at times motivation of characters seems flimsy, the conclusion of each part of the story is satisfying, and also feels a little bit like watching an episode of Game of Thrones. The loss of key characters feels real because the game does such a good job of creating a natural bond between the gang and the player experiencing it. The environment you occupy is vibrant and full, sprawling with life and activities, and the characters and narrative are equally as compelling. You will never find yourself absent of a task, but more often overwhelmed by the possibilities offered in-game. No game is without faults, but finding them in Red Dead Redemption 2 is a task all its own. Hilarious bugs and glitches have definitely caused irritation, maybe uncontrollable laughter, but I didn't experience anything game-breaking. With a couple rough around the edge mechanics and button schemes, some two-dimensional characters around a wealth of fully round characters, and some silly writing pulling you out of the rich moments, Red Dead is undeniably great. Red Dead Redemption 2 is superb, and you should play this game as soon as you get a chance. Don't wait for the holidays, buy it now. Thank you for everyone who has tuned in and has followed along and listened to this massive review. This is probably one of the biggest that we've ever done, but this is also one of the biggest games that we've played on the channel. Thank you so much to our current subscribers, and welcome aboard to any new subscribers. Please like and share this video if you like some of the points. Please comment below if you'd like to add something that you felt that I missed or should have touched more on. I'm always trying to have an awesome dialogue with the viewership, as well as have just great conversations about gaming in general. Thank you so much again, and we will see you guys next time, more than likely playing Fallout 76. Until then.